So we wanted to have this panel basically because we wanted to make sure everyone understands that there's ways that you can stream without spending a lot of money. And we're going to talk about a couple different things today. I'll kind of give you guys a rundown of how the panel is going to go so you're not in the dark. So we're going to start, everyone's going to introduce themselves, and then each person's going to share sort of a favorite story from the trench of some sort of interesting live event that they did on a relatively low budget, something that sort of had a high ROI in terms of their perceived value from their audience or the client that they work for. We're going to basically go through the live streaming workflow in order. So we're going to start talking about camera switch and capture, people's hardware front end, what they're using for a relatively low budget front end. Then we're going to talk about internet connectivity and talk a little bit about encoding in that section. And finally talk about delivery platforms. So I'll start off with the introduction. My name is Alden Fertig. I'm the product manager for broadcasting at Ustream. And part of the reason why we wanted to be part of this panel from Ustream is that Ustream launched a live broadcasting platform in 2007. And one of our missions has always been to make it affordable for everyone to do live streaming. So we start with, we have mobile applications, iPhone and Android applications, where people can stream directly from that live to the internet. And they can use our ad-supported platform, and it's all entirely free, unlimited bandwidth, unlimited viewers. And then we also go up to professional plans. We have people using all the enterprise-level encoders that you've seen here at the show, and those are being used by Fortune 500 companies and major brands to distribute their content on our platform. So that's sort of a little bit about Ustream and why I'm here. And I'm going to moderate the panel, so mostly it's going to be these guys sharing their stories. So we'll go into the round of introductions now, and we'll start with Emory.
My name is Emory Levy. I work for Northeastern University in Boston. Specifically, I work for the athletic department, and my role as video production manager is all live broadcasting for all our sports. We have 18 varsity sports, and we stream almost all home games online, which comes out to about 120 streams a year. And so I manage that team in terms of content creation and then content delivery and user front end and how and where our viewers can watch all these games.
Hey guys, I'm Ken Zamko from LiveView. I'm Director of Sales and Marketing. Out of curiosity, how many people here are familiar with LiveView? All right, cool. There's quite a few hands. So maybe for people who aren't familiar, LiveView has been around for about 5 years, and we develop devices that bond together multiple cellular connections, so 3G and 4G on all the publicly available carriers like Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, and T-Mobile. And we aggregate that bandwidth to get the capacity that we need to transmit very high-quality video from anywhere without needing a satellite truck or microwave or a hardline Ethernet connection. We were known in the industry as the backpack company. Basically, we had backpacks that you would plug a camera or a switching device like, say, a Wirecast and so on to. Now we also have a smaller device, the LU40, which is essentially the same thing, just much easier to carry and more portable.
I'm Chris Kelly. I work for Quality Tech, also referred to as QTS. It's a large data center company, and I manage the media services division, and we're kind of an overlay, and it's just a small boutique department that helps clients get online and stream, and pretty much it.
So we're going to move on to each one of the panelists sharing sort of a story from the trench. And with these stories, we're looking to kind of put things in context so you can see a real-world scenario of something that was hopefully a successful event and done on a very small budget. And I have some images to go along with it. So Emory, you want to get started?
Sure. We'll see what the first image is. There we go. So we do really 3 different types of productions in terms of scale, some very expensive and very expensive, and some very small. This is one of our baseball productions, and you can see they're starting from the left. And you can see they're starting from the left a NewTek Tricaster, and then next to it a NewTek 3-play machine, which we use for instant replay of baseball. And then we have several Sony cameras around the ballpark. And then we use a Wirecast software at the end using an Ethernet connection to stream it. And that's kind of our mid-range production. I think the next one, this is our control room where we have an arena. We do hockey and basketball productions. We have a bigger production, and it's one of the top-of-the-line Tricasters and top-of-the-line 3-plays. I think we actually have a video of us directing a game there. There we go. That's a hockey game. And so that's really our biggest production. It costs significant amount of money. Everything we do eventually streams through Wirecast, but just the equipment cost is big. And in terms of personnel, we have between 15 and 20 people on a team producing it. Our real story from the trenches is this. This is our rowing production. We have rowing teams, both men and women, that row on the Charles River in Boston. And we've been tasked, or we were tasked a few years ago, to start broadcasting their rowing events. And not only that, but provide some kind of GPS feed, though they didn't call it that. They said just have a map somewhere and show where we are. Because with the camera, you can't really tell where you are on the Charles. It's a 2K race, and how long are we going? And they wanted a little bit more information there. And so we're on a boat. There's just us on a boat going along the river with the rowers. And so on this boat, we had to fit a camera and a laptop with Wirecast to stream it, and some kind of 3G card, though this looks pretty good now. We just had the little 3G card, and then a little mobile waterproof GPS, because everything gets wet all the time on the boat. And we just had to make this happen, and it was so successful. It was one of our most viewed events ever, even though hockey and basketball is significantly more popular in Boston and in our university. And so it was very low budget. It was a Canon GL2 we used, because we were afraid everything that we actually own that looks really good is going to get wet. And just MacBook Pro with Wirecast and a little GPS device. That was it. And it turned out to be very, very successful.
Okay. Ken, you want to talk about what we have here?
Yep. Great. So we, as a technology provider, we work with quite a variety of customers. They range all the way from the high-end broadcasters, so news networks, cable networks, and so on, local affiliates, all the way down to individual sports organizations, also a lot of varsity and various types of entertainment and so on. In this particular production, we're looking at What's Trending Live with Shira Lazar. They got an exclusive interview with Sir Richard Branson when Virgin America launched a new route from Los Angeles to Philadelphia. So they were on the inaugural flight, just capturing a number of clips for publishing later. And then as soon as they landed on the tarmac in Philadelphia, they fired up the LiveView backpack. They had I believe a Sony EX plugged in, and they were streaming the entire interview live to one of the live streaming platforms. And again, with simply a camera and a backpack and a couple of microphones, they were able to do a live show and have people interact in real time. So they had viewers actually asking questions on Twitter, and interacting and proposing questions to Sir Richard Branson. So that's one example. Another example is how the New York Giants use LiveView. And they've used LiveView throughout last season in a number of events and use cases. They started out the season with the naming rights ceremony of MetLife Stadium. So it was renamed from Giant Stadium to the Meadowlands when it was rebuilt, and then they sold the naming rights to MetLife. So it was a big ceremony. They were walking around throughout the celebration, interviewing players, coaches, showing the fans, and so on. And it kept progressing all the way till Super Bowl. Maybe go back to the previous picture. This is an example of our LU40 device at Media Day right before Super Bowl. So they wanted to give fans access, kind of exclusive access that nobody else could provide to again, the players, the coaches, and so on. So again, what we see, I forget which camera it is, but it's also a prosumer camera, I believe Sony EX as well, with the same LiveView pack that the camera operator is carrying, going to Akamai. So through the LiveView servers for Akamai distribution. On the next slide, that was after they won Super Bowl. So that was a fun season when your customer kind of throughout the season uses your product, and then it goes all the way to the Super Bowl celebration. So this is here in New York on Canyon of the Heroes. The different packs that you're seeing, this is our bigger backpack. They used it because they had an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people in attendance. That's a lot of cell phone activity. And so they wanted our most robust product. This bigger backpack has a stronger antenna. It has a larger number of modems. And they were able to push a pretty consistent 2 megabit per second uplink feed from the float. So they were going all the way up on the floats covering the parade, and then they ended up the transmission back at the stadium with all the fans. Again, just with a backpack and a camera, they were able to stream directly to Akamai on a very low budget. So.
Great. Chris?
So basically, I don't really have a specific event in mind, but I guess a lot of the times we just overlay with corporate clients like the New York Times, Wake Forest, a bunch of pharmaceuticals, Fannie Mae and Vanguard. They were some of the ones that we actually looked at their existing infrastructure that they had in place. Some people had TriCasters, some people had video conferencing departments, and with cutbacks and layoffs and things, like people got juggled around and they had access to a lot of resources like video fiber and Tambergs and such, but they didn't necessarily know how to use them. So we would come in and we could take a feed from a Polycom system. They could dial into our facility, and then we could syndicate that out to their existing network. But I guess the real down and dirty way to do it on the cheap is we would actually go on site and originate all of the streams from within inside their firewall, and then we would work with their teams to make sure that like multicasting and to efficiently use their network so that everybody could see it. And then eventually we would move up. So we would just do a stream, and then we would try to do a switched feed, and then eventually we would turn it back over to them. I guess, what was the other example? I guess kind of like Vanguard, we just went with a regular switch, and then we went with a TriCaster, and then with the most recent revision of the TriCaster software, we lost the old Windows Media Legacy access, and we weren't able to set the packet size specifically for their network. So there's a lot of really intricate details like that we help clients work through.
So before we get into the hardware setups, I want to get a sense from all you guys. If you can give kind of a budget range in terms of if you had to say what would be sort of a minimum amount that you would need to spend, if you wanted to do sort of a simple kind of single camera shoot, what would that cost, and how cheaply could you do it, assuming they maybe had some basic infrastructure in place like an internet connection? I mean, for your clients, what's the cheapest you've ever been able to do something?
You could do it for $500 or less, literally.
And then Emory, for the setup on the river, I mean, it sounded like maybe you have a data plan, you have a MacBook Pro, so...
Yeah, and a camera, $500 or less, depending on what equipment you have. For the bigger one we had, for the hockey and basketball equipment-wise, it's probably $150K, but the river one is very, very cheap.
And for the Giants opening day?
Yeah, so I think that depends on the frequency of usage. So our units usually are either leased on a long-term basis or rented short-term. They range in price between $1,000 and $2,500 a month. So if you're just doing one event, then obviously that entire cost is all centered on one event. But if you have a number of events throughout the month, so 4 or 5 or more of these, then you get close to the range that Chris mentioned of about $500 per event.
So you guys are saying we can produce events in the range of maybe $500 to a couple thousand, depending on what equipment we already have at our disposal. And that's a lot of what we want to talk about on the panel today. So let's talk a little bit about sort of what you guys are using for front-end cameras, capture, switching. And Chris, you want to talk a little bit about some of the gear?
Sure. Actually, we've the camera in the back is actually one of the cameras that we prefer. It's a JVC 700 series. It records to the normal SD cards that most still cameras take, and we actually priced it out. And if we were to record this on the old DV cam tapes, the SD cards for 32 gigs that can record hours is actually cheaper now. So that's the workflow that we prefer just for ingest. You can use like KeyPros and other ways just to digitally record it, but we found that this is the most.
So Ken, you guys make a unit that has a HD-SDI input and then an HDMI input. And how are you finding, I think one thing that's pretty interesting on the low end is possibilities with HDMI, because HDMI allows a pretty high quality signal, and a lot of really cheap cameras are using that as the interface of choice. So how are you seeing adoption as far as the HDMI units?
So as mentioned, we have a range of different customers, and we don't really do our own productions. I think most of our customers still use SDI, either SD-SDI or HD-SDI, but increasingly we do see more customers that use HDMI, and also when they use video outputs that don't come from camera. Again, I think we all mentioned Wirecast. If you want to have output via HDMI to have a produced show with switching between multiple cameras and adding graphics and ads and so on, then HDMI becomes a great option. So yeah, we're seeing a mix, but right now it's still mostly SDI for us.
And Emory, we saw your setup. You're using a lot of Tricasters, and then you're using Wirecast at the end sort of as your encoding engine. And what's your capture into Wirecast?
And so it depends on the production. When we do the down and dirty, the on the river, the GL2 has a FireWire output, which is great for us. So we just have FireWire out of the camera into the laptop, and that's the only input really in terms of video. And everything else we try to do HD SDI. We actually use the same cameras as well, the JVC 700s. We love them. And so we take everything HD SDI into Tricaster, either the big Tricaster or little Tricaster, depending on what production, and then HD SDI out of Tricaster, and then we have Mac Pros with either Aja or Blackmagic capture cards, and then HD SDI right into Wirecast and streaming there.
And what percentage of productions that you guys are seeing are HD versus SD?
Everything for hockey and basketball, and men's basketball, is HD, and everything else is SD just because of budget limitations. So I would say a third is HD, and the rest is then.
What do you think for your clients?
Not in a scientific way, just kind of
ballpark.
I would say probably 60 to 70% already HD. In some cases, maybe they'll down convert at some point, but we're seeing more HD now.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Almost everything is HD because people want it recorded in HD for use later on.
Yeah, and one thing we see in our platform a lot is that it definitely pays to have an HD workflow, even if you're going to stream at 640, 360 and dumb it down to 600, 800K. It's huge night and day difference. We can see what's, we'll have streams sometimes that people go, wow, that looks amazing. What's the bit rate? Oh, it must be 2 megabits per second. No, it's 640, 360, 500K. But, if you have great lighting, great HD workflow, and high quality capture, really, really pays to invest in sort of the front end. Sort of the old expression is garbage in, garbage out, and it definitely matters. So we're going to move on now to the next section. Let's talk about sort of encoding and internet connectivity. So we'll start with Ken because obviously you have a very specific sort of case on the internet connectivity. You described a little bit before in terms of the bonded cellular idea, and you want to kind of just lay it out real quick for people who aren't familiar with the concept, how it works, why someone would want to use it.
Sure. So the way we work is, as mentioned, we have a number of cell phone connections inside the unit. Our unit encodes the video in H.264. It breaks it down into multiple pieces, and then it decides how much data to send on each different wireless connection. And then we have, on the receiving end, we have a server that knows how to recompile all that data back together into one raw video feed. And we typically have two main workflows. One is when you're going back to a studio environment, whether if it's a kind of a full-blown switcher or something like a Tricaster and so on, where you would want to have a physical receiver with SDI out, and then you just get that as any other type of ingest feed, and you manipulate and then republish it later on. And usually we don't have much visibility on that side. Once it's in the studio and we give an SDI out feed, we don't really know what further encoding our customers are doing. The other type of production, and that's actually what we did with both the examples that I showed with the Giants and with what's trending, is that they go directly to the web without actually stopping through a studio first. And then we run a virtual server for them and do the web encoding on their behalf. So typically we just run a flash media encoder and send it to the CDN of choice. And then the CDN, typically, like if we're talking about Ustream, we'll typically take that and then distribute it across different platforms like iOS and so on. And then we see, and I guess we'll talk more about distribution later on.
Yeah.
But that's the workflow that we're seeing.
And Emory?
And so we use Wirecast for all delivery at the end. But we do two different bit rates. For our SD productions, we do 550 kilobits per second, and for our HD, we do 2 megabits per second, all encoded in H.264, all using flash media encoder, and then going to our CDN at the end and making it available on iOS devices and everything else. And I agree with what you said before with garbage in, garbage out. We've been getting great feedback for all the productions, and people don't know it's 550 kilobits per second. People come to us and say, well, what should I do? Should I use 2 megabits or more? How can I make it look like this? And we tell them it's not like that. Get a good tripod. That's going to help, but the bit rate is pretty good.
Yeah, one of the most common mistakes we see people make is, if sometimes people have the bandwidth and they have free encoding software and they think, oh well, I can bump up the quality by doing 1080 frame size and 2 megabits per second, and then they don't even have a good enough signal really to take advantage of that to begin with. And then also what they do is they end up making their quality worse because it starts stressing their CPU so much that they start dropping frames, and then their viewers maybe can't handle that sort of bit rate on the viewing side, so they're dropping frames, they're stuttering. And so a lot of times people, in an attempt to sort of bump up their quality, actually reduce their quality significantly.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of people that will choke the internet connection trying to watch the stream internally so that the master stream can't get out, and they kind of ruin it for everybody.
So sometimes you said maybe you have a direct link to your data center, but do you have situations where you kind of need to use the bandwidth that's available on site, and how does that typically work out?
Well, normally, I guess broadband is more secure now, so you can go out and just get a Comcast line or a Cablevision line, and that'll pretty much hold up. But when that doesn't, we usually roll back to a bonded cellular solution or even an IP over satellite.
And I made a comment to someone yesterday where I said schools are easy because schools usually have great IT departments, and so I'm sure Emory has made friends with his IT director to get the bandwidth he needs coming out of his facilities. But one situation that you need to be really aware of is when you get into an environment like a school or a hotel is a really difficult one sometimes, because they'll have these internet connections that are set up in a way where they have a timeout on them maybe, or they're just proxied in such a way that it won't accept just someone plugging in and trying to push a big stream out. So there's really no substitute for getting at the location early and just trying to stream something out, as many days in advance as possible. And sending out a stream from your location not only shows that maybe you have the bandwidth, it's a little bit better than just doing a speed test, because if you send out a stream, you can also see that, okay, the firewall isn't blocking this type of traffic as well. But I think it's really tough, because when you're talking about streaming on a budget, the connection can end up being one of the most expensive things, because if you're trying to stream from a venue that doesn't have bandwidth already, it's not like, unfortunately, you can't call up Comcast or Verizon and get them to just show up in 12 hours and bump the bandwidth up, by 10 megabits. It's very dependent on your physical location. But that's why, solutions like the bonded cellular are very popular in terms of, because after if you can't have the sort of normal bandwidth through a typical kind of business class or residential internet, and if you don't have a bonded cellular solution, then at that point you need to start looking at satellite trucks or microwave, and those solutions start to get pricey very quickly. I think once you get into that range, we're not looking at the same budget we were talking about earlier. We're not in a $500 to $5,000 range anymore. I think let's talk a little bit about sort of what you guys are doing in terms of encoding profiles. I was talking with Ken earlier. H.264 is definitely seems to be the most popular. I'm sure most of you guys have attended panels in terms of learning about iOS encoding to iOS devices versus Flash, and I think at this point it's pretty popular to do H.264 AAC. That's what we see the most of. I think it looks the best. I think it sounds the best. But what about bit rates, frame sizes, and any other nuances of H.264 AAC? Or Chris, sometimes with your clients for internal streams, are they wanting to do something different because they need to work with some legacy version of Windows Media? Or
yeah, they either want to go full bore and do a 2 meg stream just because they think they can on their network, or it's Windows Media 7 or older because nobody's been able to upgrade their laptops in 7 years. So.
What we do, I mentioned it earlier, we have the HD feed and the SD feed. For HD, we do 2 megabits per second. We do everything in 720p, so it's 1280 by 720, which we found to be very successful. It's H.264 AAC baseline, so that iPhone devices can see it. And then it goes to either a Flash front-end portal that we have for desktop devices, or a very, very basic HTML portal here, which once you click on it, it uses the built-in QuickTime viewer to view the stream. For our SD productions, again, we use 550 kilobits per second, but the same kind of profile. We use AAC and H.264. And we have found that for HD productions, some viewers just can't get the 2 megabits per second. Some viewers are trying to watch it on an iPhone with a 2G connection or something, and they don't get it. It doesn't matter how many warnings you tell them. And so we have two simultaneous streams. For our HD productions, we do SD at the same time, and we try to educate our viewers as much as possible and tell them that on such a small device, you're not going to be able to tell that it's 720p versus 720 by 480 or anything else. And so we try to tell them that there are two different options, and we try to offer that when the bandwidth is available. And when we're on campus, we have a great relationship with our IT department. We usually have more than 20 gig up and down. It's a ridiculous network that we never have to worry about. When we're on the river, we have to really downgrade everything. We usually do around 450 kilobits per second, and that's the only choice. And what I was telling when we had our phone conversation earlier to talk about this, there's a bridge on the Charles River that the rowers go under as part of their race, and we have to go under it as well. And once we go under, cellular network just disappears. And so we quickly try to resume it, but people watching at home just want to see what happened and who rode faster, and those are the kind of problems that we have to deal with in terms of bandwidth and being on location.
So that's a good segue into Ken. So if you take off the sales hat for a moment and tell us real world scenario, what do you find people can typically get for the upload bandwidth, and what sort of resolution? If we want to be a little bit conservative, I think, even if the box is capable of doing 720p, we don't necessarily want to do that, because if we don't know what the cellular conditions are going to be, we don't want to be pushing this giant frame size and then not have enough bits per pixel to really get our video quality. So what do you find people would do on a more conservative side, in terms of a frame size and a bit rate? What would they achieve out of something like this or your bigger unit?
Sure. So maybe for a quick sec, I'll go back to your comment earlier about crap in, crap out. We usually try to provide the highest possible quality going into the second encoder. So basically, from our field unit to our server, we try to have the best possible quality. Then for distribution, we'll encode it at whatever our customer prefers to have, which ranges in all the numbers that are mentioned, anywhere between 500 and 500K and 2 megs. On our side, on the transmission side, we have a number of factors to weigh in. So one is the available bandwidth in the field. Two is the delay that the user wants. And three, like you mentioned, the actual resolution and the picture size. And you can tweak usually about one or two of them, but it'll affect the other. So you can have great 1080i picture quality, but then you also want to have good bandwidth, and it would help to have slightly higher latency. Or if you really care about having the lowest possible latency, then like you said, you probably want to reduce your resolution. And again, if bandwidth is not available, then lower resolution also is preferable. What we started doing recently was adding automatic resolution, so that the user doesn't actually have to choose if they want to go 1080i or 720p or SD. I mean, within HD or within SD, our unit determines the best possible picture quality given the bandwidth available, given the latency desired, and yeah.
So let's move on to the last topic, which is delivery platforms. And Emory, I know you have sort of like tier 1 sports, and you have lower tier sports, and so you said you kind of do something a little different on the delivery side. So you want to talk about how basically when we're talking about delivery, we're talking about where you send your stream, and maybe there's some content management aspect to it, and then also how you can make sure that people can view it on every screen, view it on their desktop, view it on mobile devices. So what are you guys doing for a delivery platform?
All right, so we're actually in charge of the production. We don't have any servers in-house that we stream from. We work with a company called Stretch Internet out of Arizona, and they work with a lot of universities and colleges. They have Wowza servers, and they work with Akamai, and they take care of the back end and provide us with a content management system to work through that. And so all our productions, everything ends up with Wirecast, and using Wirecast, we stream it to their servers, and then on their servers, everything gets encoded and delivered onto end users. And as I mentioned briefly before, we have a desktop portal that we use to deliver content for laptops and desktops. And the reason we do that, it's Flash-based, there's a lot of design elements to it. And the reason we do that is because video is not the only thing that our fans want. It's sports, and so they also want to be able to chat. They want to have some social media integration, and they want stats for baseball, for hockey, for basketball. There are a lot of stats that go with our production. We don't want to clutter up our screen with putting all the stats as overlays. And so that Flash-based desktop portal allows people to watch the video on one side and then watch stats on the other side. That's not really possible on iPhones. It's a little possible on iPads, depending on how you do it. But on iPhones, they have the possibility of seeing the video stream, or looking at stats, not at the same time. And so we work, continue to work with this company, with Stretch Internet, to try to integrate as many things as possible onto mobile platforms so that users get the same kind of delivery platform and the same kind of experience as they get on desktops, to try to add all those elements so that people see everything that we provide for them. But we just do the one stream. We stream once, and they make sure it's encoded properly and delivered properly, depending on the device that users have.
So Chris, for some of your clients, you mentioned you might be doing internal streams, so in that case, delivery platform doesn't really come into it. But if they have something that they want to stream out to the world, how do you guys do that? Are you sometimes acting as your own delivery platform? Do you work with any CDNs?
Yeah, for me, I guess there's kind of like a, not politics, but I guess like we're a data center, so a lot of times like we don't want to compete with CDNs and such because they are our customers. So we have a pretty small deployment of Wowza servers, and we have real Windows and QuickTime as well for people that really want the older formats that some of the CDNs don't support. But we typically go with a Wowza cluster, and yeah.
So Ken, for the clients you work with, what percentage of them are sort of doing their own homegrown delivery in terms of maybe they have actual, contracts with different CDN providers, or they serve it all from their own servers, versus maybe some of your clients use a platform like Ustream or like one of the other platforms that's out there?
Yeah. So it's hard for me to put exact percentages, but I would say there are probably three groups. On the higher end, like the major broadcasters, an NBC or a CNN would never come and tell us what they're using for distribution. They have people who are tasked only with acquisition and people tasked only with distribution, and we never see that side of their business. Then you have the middle tier customers that, depending on exactly how much focus they want to put on their video players and on their distribution, they might use something like Akamai or another CDN and try to build their own tools around it, like all the social media stuff and the chat and other things, or they might go to a prepackaged platform like Ustream to get everything all at once, so all the multi-bit rate encoding and all the devices and the social media and so on. And then finally, there are the smaller customers that really don't have the resources to even think about it. They just want to, go straight to a Ustream without even considering other options. So these are probably the three types of customers that we see.
Great. So we have about 10 minutes for questions, so I want to open it up to questions and see what value we can add here.
Wow.
Are there any free solutions for encoding, software-based solutions?
Yeah, so the question was whether there are any free software-based encoding solutions, and yeah, there definitely are. We see a lot of people using Flash Media Live Encoder, and I'll say Flash Media Live Encoder works really well. So it doesn't work for iOS, so that's the catch. And then also there's Microsoft Expression Encoder, and that's more geared towards streaming to Silverlight, and both of those are really capable. As far as streaming to iOS, I think there are services like Ustream, our service does it. There's other ones, like Emory was saying, they work with a company that does it. So I think that's definitely a model that can be used, which is you can use a free encoder, send one flash stream, and then you can find a service that will handle both the delivery and breaking out the iOS versions.
Yeah, because if you want to get into iOS, the segmenting has to take place usually, at the encoder level, and that's like the elementals and spinnakers, and those are $10,000. Usually, but you can use a Flash Media Encoder and then bounce it off of a Wowza server that'll do the segmenting. But then also you just send it right to Ustream, and they can convert it for you, and it's very simple.
And what was the second one that Microsoft was working?
Expression Encoder. Yep. And those, I mean, there's a lot of there's nuances between when someone might go to a hardware encoder, when they may go to a more expensive software encoder. But there's a lot of people that use Flash Media Encoder. A lot of people run it command line. It's a very capable software, so it's not. You definitely do not have to spend a lot of money to encode a good quality stream. Where you end up having to spend more money is on is more on your front end cameras, capture, switching, because it's a little bit harder to sort of do that on the cheap, I guess, because there is a difference between, and also you want to spend money on this may seem like a no-brainer, but spend money on capable producers. Spend money on guys that know how to actually shoot and know how to, get great shots, because a lot of it, Emory made the point earlier, which is, he always gets great feedback on his productions. And we had another clip we didn't show, but, a lot of it is just that production value, making sure you're capturing the right action, making sure you're providing that value. Some of it is outside the video even, like Emory was saying, knowing what your audience wants. Sports fans don't just want, a shot, they want stats, they want everything else.
I think I'm probably in the same boat with a lot of other people where we're dialed into a lot of the streaming, the technology and whatnot, the cameras, we've got some of the production skills that we're talking about. But the one linchpin maybe a lot of us are kind of iffy on is the switcher. Can you make some recommendations? We're talking down and dirty, so what's a good value when it comes to incorporating a switcher? Can you offer any recommendations, maybe a software switcher or what?
Well, we use two different kinds. We use Wirecast and Tricaster. Tricaster is hardware-based and Wirecast is software-based. And Tricaster comes in all varieties. I know their top of the line is around $40,000, and their cheapest one is a little under $10,000. $10,000, excuse me. And that provides a lot of functionality. Allows you multiple camera angles, allows you graphic overlays, allows a lot of things. On the software side, Wirecast, and I might be wrong, I think it's $500 now, a license for Wirecast, and it's an amazing piece of software. If it's not live sports, if it's not something where you need to see all your camera inputs at the same time and switch in a moment's notice, it provides you the ability for as many things as you can stuff in there. If you have a Mac Pro and you have all these capture cards and you can capture 10 cameras, Wirecast will take it. If you want to have 17 layers of graphics, Wirecast will take it. If you want to have ads and anything, and if you want to stream to 7 different servers at the same time, it just does it all. I couldn't say enough good things about Wirecast.
Yeah, Wirecast is great. In the other room, we had a lunchbox computer, and you can just put in a couple, really cheap Blackmagic cards in there, and you can use them as sources. It's probably the cheapest way to go. I guess the next cheapest switcher would probably be the Blackmagic. Their little TV broadcast. It's 4 HDMI in, 4 SDI in, and that's around $1,000. And then from there, I guess Panasonic has it's got a 50 in the name. It's technically 5 input. It's 4 HDSDI and a DVI, which is nice in an environment like this because you could take a slides input and switch between cameras. But that doesn't do any encoding. You then have to hand that off to an encoder. And that's about, I think, $3,400.
One of you guys mentioned that on a budget that you said you could do live streaming for $500 or less. What would that consist of, given that just a laptop is probably going to cost you $500 before you even load any software on it?
So I think the caveat that maybe wasn't given was that sometimes you have to look at what gear you already have. So I mean I think to say we could do it $500 start to finish. I mean I can say I can stream off my iPhone, which maybe this is $500 start to finish, and I can stream off of here, and we've had a lot of people do streams off of here that get a lot of viewers. The quality is not going to be there, but I think assuming you have a laptop that's reasonably capable, one solution that a friend of mine who's here at the conference had was he wrote a piece of software. There's the H.264 Pro Recorder from Blackmagic, which is $500. And he figured out a way to get the stream off of there that doesn't use your CPU at all, so you can use a pretty bad laptop, and you can use an older Mac laptop, and you can actually do HD streaming from that. So, I think, maybe you're not going to be $500, for really starting with nothing, but, I think in most cases there's a lot of computers around now, and so if you can find a computer somewhere, that you can repurpose, the only caution I'd give is that, video encoding is very CPU intensive. So if you're using an older computer, you're definitely going to have to be very conservative with your bit rates and your frame sizes. I mean, very conservative. I have a reasonably good Mac. I use this for all my work stuff. It's totally fine. But even for encoding, I can't do very much with this at all. So I think it's just that the less money you get, you have to be really conservative about not trying to try to do HD out of the box.
And to me, again, it's
No, go ahead.
it's about the frequency of usage. So if you have all that infrastructure in place, if you just use it once a year, then yeah, all the cost goes into that one event. But if you have a series of events, if either you have customers that will pay you to produce content for them, or if you have your own content that you can monetize, then obviously the more events that you do, the lower the cost per event.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add the $500 thing, because you can actually rent a MacBook Pro 15-inch from like TechServe for $99, and then the Blackmagic Ultra Studio, which is $1,000. They rent that, I think, for another $150 a day, and you get those two, and then you just install the free software, and you can encode from that. And you can actually, I think you can still get Flash Media Encoder for Mac. The Wirecasting you'd have to pay for, but that's definitely $500 you're in.
I think if you're doing a very simple stream, invest in your equipment, invest in the cameras and the laptop, and then Ustream has a free solution. And for a couple of our non-sport stuff, we stream commencement addresses for Northeastern. We used a company called Livestream, which is very similar, and they have built-in software that's called Procaster. It's all part of their package that's free and ad-based, and so you don't need to spend money there. Spend it on the production side.
Yeah, we make a version of Wirecast as well called Ustream Producer. We have a free version, and we have a lot of people using Logitech C920 webcams. The quality on them is amazing for a webcam. Again, you have the right lighting. If you don't have a lot of motion, you can get it close enough to your subject. I mean, I can't say enough for a $79 webcam how good it looks.
What approaches have you taken to capping distribution costs? Obviously, the Ustream model ad funding is slightly different, but in paying CDNs, if you suddenly have an event which goes crazy, do you take the approach cap it, or do your clients take the approach cap it, stop distribution at a certain volume, or do you just let it run and risk bill shock?
I mean, I think I can speak for Ustream specifically. I mean, that's pretty much our bread and butter is that because it's ad supported, it scales, and we have a lot of people who are using our platform for that reason, basically just because they can't afford bandwidth that they're streaming themselves. And so I think, basically someone's got to pay for it. So either you pay for it or your viewers pay for it. And if your viewers pay for it, they pay for it either through watching ads or they pay for it through pay-per-view or subscriptions. So, that's pretty much the only choices that you have, until the CDNs start giving away bandwidth for free. Someone's got to pay for it. So either you pay for it, or we have a lot of small churches that they say, well, $99 a month is too much for us to afford to stream, and we don't want our congregation to see ads because it's the content we don't know what it's going to be, and so. Maybe we'll see more of situations like that where they could go to a pay-per-view model where, hey, you have to pay $1 to watch the service, but that's what we need to do to, subsidize the cost of the production or whatever. I think we got to wrap up here, but we'll be around on the sides. If you guys have questions for us, we'll try to clear off the stage for another panel.